Dang it, I forget what year it is. Who laughed at that joke? The critical thinking is not there, guys. I had no train of thought. Hispanics, blacks, and dang it, the token white kid. I no longer have any investment in this. It's not racism if we're white. Hi guys, welcome back to another Rants video. I watched something that's technically not new, but it's new to me, so we're gonna go with it. It was a very wholesome movie. So I'm gonna do my best not to say wholesome 200 times in this video. I shouldn't, because that's not the only thing I enjoyed about it. But anyway, I watched Freedom Writers the other night. I had no idea this movie existed. I had no idea what it was. And then YouTube, being YouTube, randomly threw a clip on there, and I was bored, so I clicked on it, and it intrigued me. So I watched it, and I think it was really good. I really liked it, and by the time it was at I think I stayed up a little late watching it. I stayed up past my bedtime to finish the last couple of minutes of that movie. But it was really, really good. And I was kind of just, walking around the house getting ready for bed going, that was a good movie. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah. I'm assuming most people have seen this movie if they've heard of it. I don't know. Well, I don't really have a whole lot of spoiler-free stuff because there's potential rant coming. Anyway, yeah, this movie is very good. I really like this movie. So basically, overarching plot. This lady has just come into the teaching field, and it's, dang it, I forget what year it is. If you know what year it was, can you drop that in the comments? I should have done my research before I sat down, but here we are. We're lucky I remembered to record today. But whatever year it is, so it's integration is kind of just starting to be a bigger thing. So they're integrating different races into schools. And so she's gets a position with freshman, sophomore English in one of these schools that kind of enforces the integration policies. So they don't want the other kids there, but they were basically, their hands were tied, and so they had to invite them in. And so they went from this big, popular, very academically and whatever proficient, that's probably not the word I'm looking for, but one of these higher ranking schools to suddenly a bunch of their good students and athletes and whatever else are leaving because they're forced to be integrated with all of these other students who are, from very different backgrounds, very different pasts, very different upbringings. And so there's just, their grades are lower because they don't care as much. No one's gotten them to care about school. So they're just whatever. And so grades are super low, which brings the whole school's average down and whatever else. And so kids are leaving. And all of that to say, these kids are not well liked by all of, the regular, the white students and the teachers and the administration team. They're not well liked. They are there because they were told they had to be there. And the teachers, it was higher up, so they can't do anything about it. So basically, the theme of this entire movie basically is racism. Racism is the overarching theme that pulls through this whole movie. And it's probably because it was an older movie. They do it well. Like, they don't do it in the way they try and do it now, where it's just like, okay, there's racism against blacks, like the Black Panther series. The movies are not inherently bad, but the way they portray racism, at least the ideas of racism, whatever else, I don't think they do it well, because they it's like, cool, bring in all the blacks. Yep, we got just a few white guys in there. That makes sense. But they make the white guys totally inept and inferior, basically, to the black actors, characters. And then they have to crack stupid jokes. So in the first Black Panther movie, it was kind of the inferiority thing, where it's like, hey, we got like 2 white guys in this entire movie. One of them is killed, outsmarted and killed. And the other one, he's there, but it's like, oh, our technology is so far ahead of yours that you have absolutely no idea what you're doing, and blah, blah, blah. And so which in a sense, that does sort of make sense. Like, yes, their technology is a lot more ahead of the rest of the world, but at the same time, he's not stupid, and you're kind of portraying him as stupid. So that's the first one, is it kind of goes like, hey, they're just better than the whites. And then in the second one, it's mainly the one at the end, but they throw in a colonizer joke or whatever, because yes, historically, the whites spread out and we colonized places. Yeah, that's true. Not the brightest spot in our history, but don't make a stupid joke about it. That's not well written and makes no sense for the context of the scene that you're in. That's just no. And that is not how we portray racism. You don't bring awareness to racism by making another race inferior, because that's racism in itself. Or cracking stupid jokes that aren't well written, and that's just gonna turn people off more than, like, who laughed at that joke? I want to know who laughed at that joke that they made at the end of Wakanda Forever. Who laughed at it? Did anyone find that funny, or was it really just stupid and would turn us off? Because up until, like, the movie had been decent, and I was like, okay, there's some problems, because there's always problems, especially with modern Marvel stuff. And then it got to the end, I was like, okay, that just single-handedly about ruined this movie. Not single-handedly. I wasn't the biggest fan of Ironheart, whatever else. But anyway, that joke about single-handedly just like, hey, you know all that, because it's the last thing you hear. So it's like, hey, you know all this, like, you know, it's decent, it's good, you have all these kind of pretty good feelings about it, and then we end with the worst written line in the entire movie, and all of a sudden, that's all I remember, and I'm just like, I don't care about the rest of the movie anymore. I don't care that the rest of it was decent, because you ended it on such a sour note that that's what I remember, and that's the feeling that I get every time it comes up, because that is the last feeling I had with that movie. So that's really not how you portray racism, or, because it didn't like necessarily portray racism, but it's like, that's not how we represent racism, bring awareness to racism. It's not doing it well. But this movie, I feel like, did it well. Because, first of all, they set it in a time where racism is really, truly a big problem. I feel like in this day and age, it's like, yes, there's racism out there, and yes, there are racist people out there, but we make people make such a big deal out of it, and it's not even necessarily actually racist. What they're saying is racist. Like, I find this hilarious, just a little hilarious. You know, when we with like the cancel culture with mascots and whatever else, and they're like that, like we have Land O'Lakes and all of that, where it's like Indian mascots and black mascots and whatever else, and they went through that and they went, that's racist, and so they got rid of all of the diverse mascots. What's more racist, guys? representing all of these different races in our mascots for our brands, or you, as cancel culture, taking them all away so that now there's none of that representation and that diversity in mascots. The critical thinking is not there, guys. But anyway, off topic. I knew this was going to turn into a racism rant. Okay. This movie portrays racism well. We put it into an era where racism and all that is a bigger thing. And so we have an opportunity to represent it more, and more blatantly, because I feel like any racism that we have now is a lot subtler, or like an over the internet or whatever, because people lose all filters when they are commenting on the internet. But anyway, so we put it in a time period where we can actually physically show the racism happening, and where it was a bigger problem, so that we can not exaggerate, but like dramatize it. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but make it bigger. Well, it still makes sense for the setting. I don't know what word I'd use for that. But anyway, so we put it in a time period where we're allowed to make it this big, huge problem, and it's allowed to be more prevalent and more in your face, because that is the way it was in that time period, which is a very good way to do it. It's like, yes, we want to be like, hey, it's still a thing for some, there are still racist people out there, whatever else, you want to be aware of that. But if you're trying to just raise awareness about racism as a topic, put the story you're telling in a time period where that's a lot more relevant and a lot more blatantly obvious, so that you can give people basically a visual and an explanation. It's like, this is racism. This is bad. This is how it affected people. And so then when they see it outside, like they see those things and those little things and how these people are being affected or whatever, they're more aware of it. You don't need to have like a modern racism story to make people aware of modern racism. You just explain and describe it and show it in a way that makes sense, in a way that's well done. And then naturally, when they become aware of that, and inevitably if the person cares, because they need to give a crap, but inevitably when they watch that and they're exposed to that, then they're more aware of what's happening in modern times. So put it in a setting that makes sense in a way so that you can bring it up way more blatantly. So this movie did that. And I have no train of thought. Actually, I had maybe one wiggly train of thought and it just went off the rails. So anyway, yeah, so this movie just portrays racism very, very well, because it's put in that time period where they're able to be like, nope, up here with the problem, so everyone's aware of it, so that it's a main thing, so that you see the effects, that you see the extremes of it, and the dangers of it. So she is in this class full of Mexicans, blacks, or excuse me, Hispanics, not Mexicans, Hispanics, blacks, and dang it, I think it's an Asian country. I'm totally forgetting what it is though. Anyway, she's got this class full of immigrants and different races and whatever else, and then the one white kid, because the token white kid. And it's just showing her overcoming the challenges as a white woman among all these people in a time where it's like whites aren't trusted because racism is this huge thing right now. And so overcoming the struggle of getting these kids interested in learning in the first place so that she can actually teach them. And it's so good. It's so good. And I like all these characters, as little as we get to dive into them, because there's so many kids in her class and then the teacher herself. And so getting a little snapshot, I guess, of all of the main students, because there are definitely students that don't even get named, which is, yeah, it's impossible to name all of them in a way that you can actually have a good full movie with that. but taking the characters that play a big role in the story and the ones that are named and you get to know, having a little snapshot of each of their lives. And then also, you know, mostly focusing on the teacher since she's the main character. But it's they do it really well, despite the limited amount of time that we get for character development with how many characters there are. They do it very well, and what little we get of the characters it's very likable and very real. And yeah, just a very, very well done. I recognize the only actor I think I recognized, actually there's two actors. There are two actors I recognize in this movie. One is the actress for Dolores Umbridge from Harry Potter. Very different role. Actually, no, not a very different role. She's still kind of the quote-unquote villain school teacher. Like but they play it off. She's not pure evil in this one. She is not pure evil in this one. She is just a child of the culture she grew up in. And has that racism because that's the culture she grew up in, and is doing what she thinks is right by her students, by her school. Even though it's not right, but it's just, she is a child of the culture she grew up in. So she's not pure evil, but she is kind of the closest we get to a villain in this story, because she's going against this teacher, Mrs. G, at every turn. And then the other one was Mrs. G's husband. I cannot remember what I saw him in. It's literally blanking right now, but I know I've seen him in something. He came up on the screen, I said, hey, and then my mind blanked and I had no idea what I'd seen him in, but I had seen him in something. Otherwise, I hadn't seen any of these actors before. Some of that could be the teenagers. The students are no longer that age and probably don't really necessarily look like that anymore. But you know, those are the only two actors where it's like, I know who you are. Which is kind of nice sometimes and they're not even big actors. It's kind of nice to go and find a movie where it's like, I know absolutely no one. Which means I have no expectations for their skill and as actors. It's really nice sometimes to have no idea who anyone is in a movie and be like, oh cool, this person's good. But yeah, that was fun. I didn't know anybody. But yeah, acting was very well done. Character development, what little we got was good. The story was paced well. And it's such a good story. And based on true events, I found out at the end, which is very cool. But anyway, yeah, that's my spoiler-free stuff. And yeah, that's about it for spoiler-free stuff. So, I don't know if there's a whole lot of spoiler stuff to get into anyway, because story-wise, it's kind of predictable. Like, she goes into this classroom, she's trying to win their thing. They wouldn't have made a movie about it if she didn't gain their respect and do incredible things with them. So it's kind of a predictable movie, so I can't exactly spoil it. There's only a few things that, I mean, even those things like I saw coming, but you know, anyway, there's only a few things that aren't like immediately obvious from just what the movie is about. And those aren't the things I really want to talk about. We're just talking about well-done characters, the well-done portrayal of racism. That is the biggest thing, because nowadays we are trying so hard to go against racism that we end up just being racist against other races. Like, I keep going back to the Black Panther movies. They're just the ones that are most inherently in my mind right now. I know there are others out there. Antebellum is kind of one. It's like a slavery movie, but it's just like, here's a bunch of whites a bunch of racist whites who kidnap people and bring them into this camp thing in the middle of a Civil War reenactment and treat them like slaves. And I was like, at the beginning, after that reveal, I was like, no. But at the beginning, there was an interesting idea of her flashing between it almost being somewhat paranormal, and she's flashing between lives during Civil War times and modern times. That could have been interesting, but they didn't do that. They just made it whites suck. And this black lady is an awesome independent fighter. I'm not, whatever. And she takes them all out single-handedly. That's that movie. And I was so whatever. When it got revealed, oh no, she was just kidnapped and white people suck. That I was just like, nope, I'm done. Whatever. Watched it to the end, I was just like, I no longer have any investment in this because it's no longer interesting. It's just a, hey, white people suck movie. Which seems to be the way that a lot of quote-unquote racism movies go. Or like anti-racism, I guess you would call them. Or they're attempting to be anti-racism movies. But in the end, they're not being racist. They're just not being racist against blacks. They're being 100% racist against white people. That's another trend I've spotted. You know, it's like a lot of persecution goes towards Christians. Because, you know, I won't get into that rant, I'm sorry. A lot of persecution for religions anyways goes towards Christians. Now, also, kind of parallel to that, the only acceptable racism in this day and age is towards white people. We are the only race that people are allowed, we are the only people that you're allowed to be racist towards, because it's not racism if we're white, apparently. So yeah, it's definitely not as bad as it was for like blacks and whatever else. I'm not trying to compare racism to whites to racisms to other races. I'm not saying that it's worse. I'm just saying in this day and age, it's almost considered acceptable to be racist towards whites. Because reasons. Which is backwards and not right. Like, we shouldn't be racist towards any race. We are all created in God's image. And the only reason our skin color, the only reason our physical features are different is because we come from different places. And so our genes adapted to whatever environment we were in, and because of that, we look different. That is the only difference between any of us. So racism is stupid because technically speaking, we're all the same. Yes, like there's the races because we look different and so we come from different areas. So there's the distinction of you're from this place, I'm from this place, and we have that distinction just because I'm from Sioux Falls and and my friend is from California. Like, it's just a part of where we come from is a part of who we are. But then there's races, and then there's overall the species. We're all human. Cut yourself open. We all bleed red. Take an x-ray. We'll all have the same organs and pretty much the same anatomical makeup. Because we're all humans and we're all the same species. And so basically, because a whole big thing in this movie, in Freedom Writers, is we protect even within our classroom with the blacks and the Hispanics and I'm so sorry, I can't remember the other race. It's so bad. They only mention what it is. They only name it once though. But anyway, between those 3-4 races that are in the school, if we include the whites, they're all split into their different groups. And the whole big theme for them is we protect our own, we protect our own, we protect our own. I'm like, okay, that's great. And the whole process for this teacher of Mrs. G now is showing them that your own isn't just your race, it's the species, and the species is all of humanity. And so basically, her job is then to subvert racism within her class, within these minority students, and these minority races who are, the forefront of the racism because of the time period and all that. And so she has to subvert racism within her own class, between all the different groups of her class, by showing them the similarities and showing them we're all human, we're all one species, we're all one people, despite the fact that we look different. And it's a beautiful thing. And it's really cool to see how she, one, shows them these similarities and then gets them interested both in school and whatever by introducing them to the Holocaust. And it's like, yes, you suffer and it sucks. And a lot of it's like, you're trying to protect your own. And so you make fun of these different groups, even within the class. And she's like, okay, it starts with that. And then showing them the extremes of what they're doing and the extremes of racism. And shows like, this is not a good thing. And you're not like protecting your own. You are just fighting the world and you're fighting your own. So it's a very well done movie, in my opinion. It's very good. And it's honestly just because it was at a time before movies started getting so political and out there. It's such a good representation for racism awareness, because it shows racism not just against one race or one ethnicity, because there's 4 different ethnicities in this class, and in this case, whites are the minority, but there is racism between all of them. They are all at each other, and they all have assumptions about each other, and they all are so distrusting towards one another because of their experiences. But it's like, the racism is not just from the white people. The racism is coming from everyone in this movie, because everyone is so distrusting of everyone else who is not of the same physical appearance as them. So it's so good. I really, really like this movie. So yeah, I think it's wonderful, and I love this message. It's like, racism is the underlying message throughout the entire thing. But at the same time, it's the underlying theme, I guess, throughout the entire thing. But the underlying message, as we go through this, that Mrs. G is trying to pound into them, it's like, we're all human. We are more similar than we think. We don't have to be fighting each other. We don't have to be fighting at each other's throats. We can coexist. We can be even a family. By the end of the movie, they're like so close. They're family. And they don't want to leave that safe place because they don't know who else they can trust. And so, but within that then family they have, so it's within that family they have, there are so many different people and so many different races. So that it's like the underlying theme is racism, but the underlying message is, but we're all human. We're all one species. We are not meant to be at each other's throats all the time. So yeah, it's so good. And it was, okay, not the most wholesome movie I've ever seen. Like, If is still way up there. But there's a lot of like wholesome moments between Mrs. G and her class, but as we get to the end of the movie and they get closer, it's so cute. But it's also just it's a very good movie, and it's very, not exactly thought-provoking, but like, it definitely raises awareness about racism, what it is, why it's bad, in a very well-written, well-done way. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Freedom Writers. I highly recommend it. It's a very good movie. But yeah, it's so good. Feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments. I post videos on this channel every Saturday. I'm thinking maybe till the end of the year, and seeing how it goes, I will maybe start up my second video again, my Wednesday video again, in January. We'll see how things are going. And then I post videos on my audiobook channel on Thursdays. I'll see you all next time.